The morning sun was barely rising when Maria Elena felt the first sharp pain tear through her body. She was alone in the small wooden cabin that served as her home on the Hartwell plantation. Her hands gripped the rough wooden bed frame as another wave of pain hit her like a thunderbolt. For hours she struggled through the most difficult experience of her young life. At just 19 years old, she was about to become a mother, but there was no doctor, no midwife, and no family to help her. The other women on the plantation were working in the cotton fields, and Maria Elena knew better than to call out for help during work hours. When her baby finally arrived, Maria Elena felt a mix of joy and terror that she had never experienced before. The tiny girl in her arms was beautiful, with soft dark hair and the most perfect little fingers she had ever seen. Despite all the pain and fear, love filled her heart completely. She held her daughter close and whispered, "Your name is Hope, my little angel. No matter what happens, you are my hope." But Maria Elena's moment of happiness was cut short. Her body was still weak and bleeding from the birth when she heard heavy footsteps outside her cabin. The door burst open without warning, and Master Thomas Hartwell stood there with his cold, calculating eyes. Well, he said, looking at the newborn baby with the same expression he used when examining livestock. "Looks like I've got myself some new property. Get up, girl. You're coming with me." Maria Elena's heart dropped to her stomach. "Master Hartwell, please. I just gave birth. I can barely stand. Please give me just a few days to recover." But Hartwell's face showed no mercy. His plantation was drowning in debt, and he had been looking for ways to raise quick money. A young woman who had just proven she could bear children was worth good money at the slave market, especially if sold with her baby. "I don't have time for your complaints," he snapped. "You'll fetch a good price at today's auction. Get yourself cleaned up as best you can and bring that baby. We leave in an hour." Maria Elena's world began to spin. She had heard terrible stories about the slave auctions in Charleston, but she never imagined she would be dragged there so soon after giving birth. Her body was still in agony, and she could barely walk without support. The thought of being sold, possibly separated from her newborn daughter, filled her with a fear deeper than anything she had ever known. With shaking hands, she tried to make herself presentable. She wrapped little Hope in the only clean cloth she could find and held her daughter close to her chest. Every step toward Hartwell's wagon sent sharp pains through her body, but she forced herself to keep moving. She had no choice. The ride to Charleston took 3 hours, and every bump in the road felt like torture. Maria Elena clutched Hope tightly, whispering prayers and promises that somehow, someway, they would stay together. She tried to stay strong for her baby, but tears kept falling down her cheeks. When they arrived at the slave market, Maria Elena's worst fears came true. The place was crowded with people who looked at enslaved human beings like they were buying cattle or horses. Men in expensive suits walked around, examining people's muscles, checking their teeth, and asking questions about their ability to work. Hartwell dragged Maria Elena to a wooden platform where other people were being displayed for sale. She could barely stand and blood was still seeping through her dress, but the auctioneer didn't seem to care about her condition. In fact, he seemed to think it was a selling point. "Here we have a fine young woman, just 19 years old," the auctioneer called out to the crowd. "As you can see, she's just proven her ability to bear healthy children. This baby girl she's holding is evidence of her value for breeding purposes. Both mother and child are being sold today." The words hit Maria Elena like physical blows. They were talking about her and her precious daughter like they were animals being bred for profit. She wanted to scream, to run, to protect her baby, but she was surrounded by people who saw her as nothing more than property. The bidding began, and Maria Elena watched in horror as different men raised their hands, calling out prices for her and Hope's lives. She recognized some of the bidders from their reputation. There was Johnson, who was known to work his people to death in the rice fields. There was Patterson, whose plantation was whispered about in fearful tones because of how cruelly he treated women. One bidder in particular made Maria Elena's blood run cold. Silas Crawford was a man whose name was spoken in hushed, terrified whispers among enslaved people throughout the region. Stories said he separated mothers from children without a second thought and treated people with unimaginable cruelty. He was examining Maria Elena with the same cold calculation that Hartwell had shown, and she could see in his eyes that he was seriously considering buying her. As the bids grew higher, Maria Elena felt her last hope slipping away. Crawford raised his hand and called out $800, a price that seemed to satisfy the auctioneer. The man began to speak about going once, going twice, when something unexpected happened. A voice from the back of the crowd called out clearly, $1,200. The entire auction ground fell silent. $1,200 was far more than anyone expected to pay, especially for a woman who had just given birth and was clearly in no condition to work. Everyone turned to see who had made such an unusually high bid. Maria Elena looked through her tears and saw a man unlike any of the other bidders. He was tall and well-dressed, but there was something different about his face. Where the other men had looked at her with cold calculation or cruel interest, this stranger's eyes showed something she hadn't expected to see at a slave auction: kindness. The man was clearly not from the American South. His clothes were different, more refined, and he spoke with an accent she had never heard before. He stood calmly as the auctioneer, shocked by the high bid, asked if he was serious about his offer. "Quite serious," the stranger replied firmly. $1,200, and I'll pay it now." Crawford looked angry that he had been outbid by such a large amount, but even he wasn't willing to go higher than $1,200. The auctioneer, delighted by the unexpected windfall, quickly accepted the bid. Sold to the gentleman for $1,200. Maria Elena felt dizzy with confusion and fear. She didn't know whether to feel relieved that Crawford hadn't bought her or more terrified about what this mysterious stranger might want with her, and hope. She had learned through hard experience that kindness from white men often came with a terrible price. As the crowd began to disperse, the stranger approached the platform. Instead of grabbing her roughly or examining her like property, he did something that shocked Maria Elena completely. He removed his fine coat and gently placed it around her shoulders. "You must be cold," he said quietly, his accent making his words sound gentle and musical. "And you need warmth for yourself and your child." Maria Elena looked up at him in complete bewilderment. In her 19 years of life, no white person had ever shown her such simple human kindness. She didn't know what to say or how to react. Was this some kind of trick? Was he trying to make her lower her guard before revealing his true cruel intentions? What do you want with me?" she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible above the noise of the market. The stranger looked directly into her eyes, and for the first time since her daughter's birth, Maria Elena saw something that gave her a tiny spark of hope. There was no cruelty in this man's face, no coldness, no calculation. There was only genuine human compassion. "I want to help you," he said simply. "Both of you. But first, let's get you somewhere safe where you can rest and recover. We have much to discuss, but it can wait until you're feeling stronger." As he helped her down from the platform, supporting her weight so she wouldn't fall, Maria Elena wondered if this was all a dream. Could it be possible that in her darkest hour, when she had lost all hope, someone had appeared who actually wanted to help her rather than hurt her? She held hope closer to her chest and followed the mysterious stranger, not knowing what the future would bring, but feeling for the first time in hours that maybe, just maybe, there was still reason to have hope. The stranger led Maria Elena away from the noisy slave market to a quiet inn on the outskirts of Charleston. Every step was painful for her, but his gentle support helped her keep moving. She noticed that he walked slowly, matching her pace, never rushing or showing impatience with her weakness. "My name is Lord Edmund Blackwood," he said as they walked. "I'm from England and I'm here on business. But when I saw what was happening to you at that auction, I couldn't just stand by and watch." Maria Elena had never heard of England, but she could tell from his clothes and manner of speaking that he came from somewhere very different from the American South. His accent was soft and musical, unlike the harsh voices she was used to hearing from plantation owners. When they reached the inn, Lord Blackwood spoke quietly to the innkeeper, a middle-aged woman who looked surprised to see an enslaved woman and her baby being treated with such care. He paid for a private room and asked the woman to bring hot water, clean cloths, and some warm food. "You need to rest and recover," he told Maria Elena gently. "I'll wait downstairs while you clean up and feed your baby. Take all the time you need." Maria Elena was still afraid to trust this kindness, but her body was too weak to resist. She carefully washed herself in hope, grateful for the first warm water she had felt in months. The clean clothes that the innkeeper brought were simple but soft, such a contrast to the rough, dirty dress she had been wearing. When she finally came downstairs carrying Hope in her arms, she found Lord Blackwood sitting at a small table with papers spread out before him. He looked up as she approached, and again she was struck by the genuine kindness in his eyes. Please sit down, he said, standing to help her into a chair. You must be exhausted. How are you feeling? Better, sir, Maria Elena replied quietly, though she was still confused about why this stranger was being so kind to her. Thank you for the room and the clothes, but I don't understand. What do you want from me? Lord Blackwood leaned back in his chair and studied her face carefully. What I'm about to tell you may be hard to believe, he said slowly. I didn't buy you to work for me or to use you in the ways that other men might. I bought you for a very different reason. Maria Elena's heart began to beat faster. She held Hope closer, preparing herself for whatever terrible revelation was coming. I bought you to set you free, Lord Blackwood said simply. The words hung in the air like something magical. Maria Elena stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. What did you say? I said I bought you to set you free, both you and your daughter. He reached for the papers on the table and showed them to her. These are called manumission papers. They're legal documents that will officially give you your freedom. Once I sign them and file them with the courthouse, you and Hope will no longer be enslaved. You'll be free people. Maria Elena felt like the room was spinning around her. Freedom was something she had dreamed about but never thought was possible. She had been born into bondage, and everyone she knew expected to die in bondage. The idea that someone could simply sign papers and make her free seemed impossible. But why? She whispered. Why would you do this for us? You don't even know me. Lord Blackwood's expression grew serious. Because what I saw today was wrong. What happens at those slave auctions is wrong. The whole system of buying and selling human beings is wrong, and I've dedicated my life to fighting against it. He went on to explain that he was part of a movement in England that opposed slavery in all its forms. His family had made their fortune in textile mills, but they refused to buy cotton that was grown by enslaved labor. Instead, they paid higher prices for cotton grown by free workers in other parts of the world. I've been traveling through the American South for several months now, he continued. I've been buying enslaved people at auctions and setting them free. You and Hope are the 15th and 16th people I've been able to help. Maria Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. There were people in the world who were willing to spend their own money to free strangers. People who saw enslaved human beings and wanted to help them instead of profit from them. I've never heard of such a thing, she said, her voice full of wonder. You mean there are others like you? People who buy slaves just to free them? More than you might think, Lord Blackwood replied with a small smile. In England, most people believe that slavery is a terrible evil that must be ended. We've already outlawed it in our own country, and many of us are working to end it everywhere else as well. He showed her more papers, letters from other people who shared his beliefs. There were stories of entire underground networks dedicated to helping enslaved people escape to freedom. There were accounts of former slaves who had made new lives for themselves in the northern states where slavery was illegal. But I must warn you, Lord Blackwood said, his tone becoming more serious. Having freedom papers doesn't guarantee your safety, especially here in the South. There are people who will try to re-enslave you, papers or no papers. There are slave catchers who make money by capturing free black people and selling them back into bondage. Maria Elena felt a chill of fear. Then what can I do? Where can Hope and I go to be truly safe? That's a choice you'll have to make, Lord Blackwood replied. I can arrange for you to travel north to Pennsylvania or New York, where slavery is illegal and you'll have more protection under the law. I have contacts there, people who help newly freed individuals start new lives. Or, he continued, you can stay here in the South for a while, under my protection, until you feel strong enough to travel. I have business that will keep me in Charleston for several more weeks. I can provide you with a safe place to stay while you recover from childbirth and decide what you want to do with your freedom. The word freedom still sounded like magic to Maria Elena. She looked down at little Hope, sleeping peacefully in her arms, and tried to imagine a world where her daughter would never know the fear and pain of being owned by another person. Why are you giving us a choice? She asked. Since you bought us, couldn't you just decide what happens to us? Lord Blackwood shook his head firmly. That's exactly the kind of thinking I'm fighting against. Yes, legally I own you until these papers are signed, but morally you own yourself. You always have. You should be the one to decide what happens to your life and your daughter's life. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the busy street outside. I've seen too much suffering caused by people who think they have the right to control other people's lives. When I give you those freedom papers, I'm not giving you anything that wasn't already yours by right. I'm simply correcting a terrible injustice. Maria Elena had never heard anyone talk this way before. In her world, white people made all the decisions and enslaved people had no choice but to obey. The idea that she could actually choose her own path seemed almost too wonderful to believe. I want to go north, she said suddenly, surprising herself with the firmness in her own voice. I want Hope to grow up somewhere she'll be truly free, but I'm scared. I don't know anything about the world beyond this area. I don't know how to read or write. How will I survive on my own? Lord Blackwood turned back to her with an encouraging smile. You won't be on your own. There are people in the North who make it their mission to help newly freed individuals. They'll teach you to read and write. They'll help you find work and a place to live. And you're stronger than you know. Maria Elena. Any woman who can survive what you've been through and still have hope for the future has the strength to build a new life. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. This contains enough money to get you started in your new life. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to keep you and Hope fed and housed while you learn how to navigate freedom. Maria Elena stared at the pouch in disbelief. You're giving me money too? But sir, I could never repay you for all this kindness. I don't want repayment, Lord Blackwood said simply. The only thing I ask is that you use your freedom well. Live a good life. Raise your daughter to be strong and kind. And if you ever have the opportunity to help someone else who's in trouble, I hope you'll remember this day and choose to help them. As the evening grew dark outside, Maria Elena sat in the warm inn, holding her sleeping daughter and trying to process everything that had happened. Just that morning, she had been an enslaved woman with no hope for the future. Now she was about to become a free person with money in her pocket and the chance to build whatever kind of life she could imagine. It seemed too good to be true, like something from a fairy tale. But Lord Blackwood's kindness felt real, and the papers on the table were real, and the money in the pouch was real. For the first time in her life, Maria Elena began to believe that maybe, just maybe, good things could happen to people like her. Tomorrow, Lord Blackwood said gently, we'll sign the papers and make your freedom official. Then we'll start planning your journey north. But tonight, rest. You and Hope are safe and you're about to become free. That's enough to think about for one day. As Maria Elena carried Hope upstairs to their room, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the mysterious stranger who had appeared in her darkest hour and changed everything. She didn't know what the future would bring. The next morning, Maria Elena woke up feeling stronger than she had in days. The comfortable bed, warm room, and good food had helped her body begin to heal from the trauma of childbirth. Hope had slept peacefully through the night, and for the first time since her daughter's birth, Maria Elena felt a tiny spark of genuine happiness. When she came downstairs, she found Lord Blackwood waiting for her with a breakfast of fresh bread, eggs, and milk. The sight of so much good food made her realize just how poorly she had been fed on the plantation. She ate gratefully while Hope nursed, feeling her strength returning with every bite. Are you ready to make this official? Lord Blackwood asked gently, indicating the legal papers on the table. Maria Elena nodded, though her hands were shaking slightly. Even though he had explained everything the night before, part of her still couldn't quite believe this was really happening. Lord Blackwood carefully read through each document, explaining what every section meant. The papers declared that Maria Elena and her infant daughter Hope were being freed from bondage and granted all the rights of free persons. They would be able to travel wherever they wished, work for wages, own property, and make their own decisions about their lives. When he signed his name with a flourish, Maria Elena felt something change deep inside her. It was as if invisible chains she had carried her entire life suddenly fell away. She was no longer property. She was a human being with rights and freedoms. How does it feel? Lord Blackwood asked with a warm smile. Like I'm dreaming, Maria Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. Like I might wake up and find myself back on the plantation. You're not dreaming, he assured her. You're free, and no one can ever take that away from you again. But even as joy filled her heart, Maria Elena felt a growing worry. Lord Blackwood, you've been so kind to us, but I have to ask, what happens when you leave Charleston? What if someone tries to say these papers aren't real? What if they try to take us back? Lord Blackwood's expression grew serious. Those are very real concerns, Maria Elena. The truth is, being free on paper and being truly safe are two different things, especially here in the South. He went on to explain the harsh realities that free black people faced in the southern states. Even with proper legal documents, they could be kidnapped by slave catchers, who would destroy their papers and sell them back into bondage. Local sheriffs and judges often refused to believe that freedom papers were genuine, especially if the person couldn't read the documents themselves. There are people who make their living by capturing free black people and claiming they're runaway slaves, Lord Blackwood said sadly. They know that most enslaved people can't read or write, so they assume that any black person with freedom papers must have stolen them or forged them. Maria Elena felt a chill of fear. Then what can we do? How can we ever be truly safe? The safest thing would be for you to travel north as quickly as possible, Lord Blackwood replied. In states like Pennsylvania and New York, slavery is illegal, and there are communities of free black people who can help protect you. But I understand that traveling with a newborn baby is dangerous, especially when you're still recovering from childbirth. He pulled out a map and spread it across the table, showing her the long distance between Charleston and the Free States. It's more than 500 miles to Philadelphia, and the journey would take at least 2 weeks by wagon. There are many dangers along the way. Maria Elena studied the map, trying to imagine making such a long journey with tiny hope. What kind of dangers? Slave catchers patrol the roads looking for runaways, Lord Blackwood explained. There are also river crossings where papers are checked, and towns where free black people aren't welcome. You'd need to travel with people who know the safe routes and have connections along the way. As if he had been reading her thoughts, Lord Blackwood continued, I've been in contact with a network of people who help in situations like this. They're called the Underground Railroad, though it's not actually a railroad at all. It's a secret network of people who help enslaved individuals escape to freedom. Maria Elena had heard whispers about such a network, but she had always thought it was just a hopeful rumor. You mean it's real? There really are people who help slaves escape? Very real, Lord Blackwood confirmed. And they're willing to help you and hope travel safely to the north. But I have to be honest with you about the risks. The journey won't be easy. You'll have to hide during the day and travel at night. You'll have to trust strangers with your life. And if you're caught, the consequences would be terrible. The weight of the decision pressed down on Maria Elena. Stay in the South and risk being re-enslaved, or make a dangerous journey north with a newborn baby. Either option seemed safe. What would you do if you were in my position? She asked. Lord Blackwood was quiet for a long moment before answering. If I were a newly freed woman with a baby, knowing what I know about the dangers in both directions, I think I would choose to take the risk and go north. The journey is dangerous, but staying here might be even more dangerous in the long run. He reached across the table and placed a gentle hand on her arm. But Maria Elena, this has to be your choice. You're the one who will face the consequences, whatever you decide. You know your own strength better than I do. Maria Elena looked down at Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. Her daughter was so tiny, so helpless. How could she protect her baby during such a dangerous journey? But then she thought about what kind of life Hope would have if they stayed in the South. Always afraid. Always at risk of losing their freedom. I want Hope to grow up truly free, she said slowly. I want her to be able to walk down any street without fear. I want her to learn to read and write and become whatever she dreams of becoming. If we stay here, she'll never have those chances. Lord Blackwood smiled proudly. Then you've made a brave decision. I'll contact my friends in the Underground Railroad today. They'll arrange for you to travel with a family who knows the safe routes. Over the next few days, while Maria Elena continued to recover her strength, Lord Blackwood made all the arrangements for their journey. He introduced her to a Quaker family named the Johnsons, who had been helping enslaved people escape for many years. They were kind, quiet people who spoke of their work as a religious duty. Ruth Johnson, the mother of the family, took Maria Elena under her wing immediately. We've helped many young mothers make this journey, she said reassuringly. I know it seems frightening, but you're stronger than you know, and we'll be with you every step of the way. The Johnsons explained how the journey would work. They would travel in a covered wagon, with Maria Elena and Hope hidden beneath blankets and supplies during the day. They would stop at safe houses along the way, homes of people who supported the Underground Railroad. At night, when it was safer to travel, they would make good time toward the north. The most important thing, Mr. Johnson explained, is that you and the baby stay completely quiet during the day. If we're stopped and searched, you must not make a sound, no matter what happens. Maria Elena's heart raced at the thought of hiding with a baby who might cry at any moment. What if Hope starts crying? What if she gives us away? Ruth Johnson smiled knowingly. We've thought of that. I have some natural herbs that will help keep her sleepy and calm during the dangerous parts of the journey. And I'll teach you some techniques for keeping babies quiet that I've learned over the years. As the day of departure approached, Lord Blackwood had one final surprise for Maria Elena. He presented her with a small leather bag, containing more money than she had ever seen in her life. This should be enough to support you and hope for several months while you get established in the North, he explained. I've also written letters of introduction to some friends of mine in Philadelphia who will help you find work and housing. Maria Elena stared at the money in amazement. Lord Blackwood, this is too much. You've already given us our freedom and paid for our journey. I can't accept so much money. Yes, you can, he said firmly. Freedom isn't just about having the right papers. True freedom means having the resources to build the kind of life you want. This money will give you choices, Maria Elena. You can take time to learn to read and write. You can be selective about what kind of work you do. You can make sure Hope has everything she needs. Tears filled Maria Elena's eyes as she realized the full extent of this stranger's generosity. Why are you doing all this for us? What do you get out of helping us? Lord Blackwood's expression grew thoughtful. Do you know what I get, Maria Elena? I get to sleep peacefully at night, knowing that I used my privileges and resources to make the world a little bit better. I get to know that Hope will grow up free because I happened to be at that auction. I get to imagine the life you'll build for yourself and your daughter. He paused, looking out the window at the busy Charleston street. And perhaps most importantly, I get to strike a blow against a system that I believe is fundamentally evil. Every person I help escape slavery is a victory against the idea that some humans can own other humans. On their last evening together, as Maria Elena prepared for the journey ahead, Lord Blackwood gave her one final piece of advice. Remember that you are not just escaping from something, he said. The journey north began before dawn on a misty morning in late spring. Maria Elena sat in the back of the Johnson family's covered wagon, holding Hope close to her chest as they rolled quietly out of Charleston. Her heart was pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror as she watched the city disappear behind them. Ruth Johnson had created a clever hiding place in the wagon bed, surrounded by sacks of grain and farming supplies. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary farm family traveling to market. No one would suspect that they were carrying precious cargo toward freedom. For the first few days, the journey went smoothly. They traveled mostly at night, when the roads were empty and the risk of being stopped was lower. During the day, they rested at safe houses, homes of people who supported the Underground Railroad and were willing to risk their own safety to help others. Maria Elena was amazed by the network of good people who opened their doors to strangers. There was the elderly widow who insisted on washing Hope's clothes and preparing special food for a nursing mother. There was the young preacher who spent hours teaching Maria Elena to recognize letters and numbers. There was the farming family who gave them fresh milk and vegetables and refused to accept any payment. I never knew there were so many kind people in the world, Maria Elena told Ruth Johnson as they traveled through the South Carolina countryside. There are more good people than bad people, Ruth replied with a gentle smile. It's just that the bad ones make more noise, so we hear about them more often. But for every person who supports slavery, there's another who believes it's wrong and wants to help end it. Maria Elena began to feel hopeful that they would reach the North safely. Hope was traveling well, sleeping peacefully during the long wagon rides and rarely crying at dangerous moments. The Johnsons treated them like family, sharing their food and making sure Maria Elena felt comfortable and safe. But on their 7th day of travel, as they approached the border between South Carolina and North Carolina, their luck ran out. They were traveling along a quiet country road in the early morning when they heard the sound of horses approaching fast from behind. Mr. Johnson's face went pale as he recognized the riders. Slave catchers, he whispered urgently to his wife. Get Maria Elena and the baby hidden now. Ruth Johnson quickly pulled Maria Elena and Hope into the deepest part of their hiding place, covering them completely with grain sacks and farming tools. Stay absolutely silent, she whispered. No matter what happens, don't make a sound. Maria Elena's heart was beating so loudly she was sure the whole world could hear it. She held Hope tightly, praying that her baby would stay asleep. The wagon came to a sudden stop and she could hear rough voices outside. "Morning, folks," came a harsh voice that made Maria Elena's skin crawl. "We're looking for some runaway slaves. A young woman and a baby. You seen anyone like that on the roads?" "No, sir," Mr. Johnson replied calmly, though Maria Elena could hear the tension in his voice. "We haven't seen anyone. We're just heading to market with our grain. Mind if we take a look in your wagon?" the slave catcher asked, but it wasn't really a question. Maria Elena could hear footsteps approaching the back of the wagon. This was the moment she had been dreading. If they were discovered, she and Hope would be dragged back to slavery, and the kind Johnson family would probably be arrested for helping them. She closed her eyes and tried to make herself as small as possible. The slave catchers began moving things around in the wagon, getting closer and closer to their hiding spot. Maria Elena could hear Hope stirring and knew her baby was about to wake up. If Hope started crying now, they would all be caught. Just as the slave catchers were about to discover them, something miraculous happened. A group of local farmers came down the road, heading to the same market as the Johnsons. They stopped to chat, creating a distraction that saved Maria Elena's life. "Well, if it isn't old Johnson," called out one of the farmers. "Heading to market too? We could travel together if you like. Safer that way." The slave catchers, not wanting to create a scene in front of so many witnesses, reluctantly gave up their search. "If you see anyone suspicious, you let us know," the leader warned before riding away. Maria Elena stayed hidden until the slave catchers were completely out of sight. When she finally emerged, she was shaking like a leaf. Hope had stayed miraculously quiet through the entire encounter, as if somehow understanding the danger they were in. "That was too close," Mr. Johnson said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We need to be more careful from here on." The close call changed everything about their journey. They became much more cautious, traveling only on back roads and avoiding towns completely. They stopped only at the safest houses, and Maria Elena spent most of her time hidden in the wagon. The constant fear and stress began to take its toll on everyone. Maria Elena found it hard to sleep, always listening for the sound of approaching horses. Hope seemed to sense her mother's anxiety and became fussier than usual. Even the normally cheerful Johnson family grew quiet and tense. But the close call also had an unexpected effect on Maria Elena. Instead of making her more afraid, it made her more determined. As she lay hidden in the wagon, listening to the wheels roll mile after mile toward freedom, she made some important decisions about her future. "I'm not going to live my whole life in fear," she whispered to Hope during one of their night travels. "When we get to the north, I'm going to learn everything I can. I'm going to become strong and smart so that no one can ever threaten our freedom again." Ruth Johnson, who overheard this quiet declaration, smiled in the darkness. "That's the spirit, dear. What are you thinking you'd like to learn?" "Everything," Maria Elena replied with a determination that surprised even herself. "I want to learn to read and write really well. I want to learn about numbers and business. I want to learn enough to help other people who escaped from slavery." As they traveled through North Carolina and into Virginia, Maria Elena began to notice changes in the world around them. There were more towns, more people, and more signs of the different ways people lived. She saw free black people working in shops and walking down streets without fear. She saw children of all colors playing together in some towns. "Is it really different in the North?" she asked Ruth Johnson one evening as they rested at a safe house. "Very different," Ruth replied. "Not perfect, mind you. There's still prejudice and unfairness, but it's a place where you can build a life for yourself and Hope. It's a place where she can go to school and learn alongside other children." The idea of Hope going to school seemed like the most wonderful thing Maria Elena could imagine. She began to picture her daughter sitting at a desk, learning to read books and write letters. She imagined Hope growing up confident and educated, able to become whatever she wanted to be. These dreams kept Maria Elena going through the hardest parts of the journey. When they had to hide in a cold, damp root cellar for an entire day, while slave catchers searched the area, she told herself it was worth it for Hope's future. When they had to cross a dangerous river in the middle of the night, she focused on the life they would build in freedom. The most frightening moment came when they were just 2 days away from the Pennsylvania border. They were staying at a farmhouse when word came that a large group of slave catchers was working the area, stopping every wagon and searching every building. "You'll have to stay hidden for at least 2 days, the farmer told them grimly. "Maybe longer. They're being more thorough than usual." Maria Elena and Hope spent 2 terrifying days hidden in a secret room beneath the farmhouse floor. It was cramped, dark, and stuffy, and Hope was having trouble staying quiet. Maria Elena sang soft lullabies and told stories about the beautiful life they would have in the north, trying to keep both of them calm. On the second night, they could hear heavy footsteps above as the slave catchers searched the house. Maria Elena held her breath as Boots walked directly over their hiding place. Hope began to fuss, and Maria Elena gently covered her daughter's mouth, tears streaming down her face as she prayed they wouldn't be discovered. The searchers left without finding them, but the experience left Maria Elena shaken. She realized how easily their dream of freedom could be destroyed, but it also made her more grateful than ever for the brave people who were risking their own safety to help them. When they finally crossed into Pennsylvania, Maria Elena wept with relief and joy. She was actually in a free state, a place where slavery was illegal. For the first time in her life, she was in a place where she legally couldn't be owned by another person. "We made it, Hope," she whispered to her sleeping daughter. "We're really free now." But even as relief flooded through her, Maria Elena knew that crossing the border was just the beginning. Now came the hard work of building a new life from nothing. She had no family in the north, no friends, no job, and no real education. All she had was her freedom, her baby, Lord Blackwood's money, and her own determination to succeed. As they approached Philadelphia, Maria Elena made a solemn promise to herself and to Hope. She would use this gift of freedom to become the best person she could be. She would learn and grow and work hard to build a good life, and someday, when she was strong enough and smart enough, she would find ways to help other people escape from slavery. 10 years had passed since that terrifying day at the Charleston slave market, and Maria Elena could hardly believe how much her life had changed. She stood in the doorway of her own schoolhouse in Philadelphia, watching her students work on their reading lessons, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction that she had never imagined possible. Hope, now a bright and confident 10-year-old, was helping the younger children with their letters. She moved between the desks with natural ease, encouraging the struggling students and celebrating the successes of others. Maria Elena smiled as she watched her daughter, remembering the tiny baby she had held so protectively during that dangerous journey north. The school had started small, just Maria Elena, teaching 3 children in the back room of a church. But word had spread through Philadelphia's community of formerly enslaved people that there was a place where children could learn to read and write, regardless of their family's ability to pay. Now, 15 children attended Hope House School, as Maria Elena had named it. Each child had a story that reminded Maria Elena of her own journey to freedom. There was young Timothy, whose parents had escaped from a tobacco plantation in Virginia. There was Anna, who had been born free but whose parents couldn't read and desperately wanted their daughter to have an education. There was Samuel, whose entire family had been freed by a Quaker family similar to the Johnsons. Maria Elena had become much more than just a teacher to these families. She had learned to read and write herself with remarkable speed, driven by her determination to help others. She had taught herself basic mathematics, history, and even some science. But more importantly, she had become a source of hope and guidance for people who were struggling to build new lives in freedom. "Miss Maria Elena," called out Anna, raising her hand excitedly. "I can read this whole page without help." "That's wonderful, Anna," Maria Elena replied, walking over to listen as the girl read aloud with growing confidence. "Your parents are going to be so proud when you read to them tonight." It was moments like these that reminded Maria Elena why she had worked so hard to build this school. She remembered the helpless feeling of not being able to read the freedom papers that Lord Blackwood had signed for her. She remembered the fear of not knowing what documents said or what rights she had. She was determined that no child in her school would ever feel that helpless. The afternoon was nearly over when Maria Elena heard a familiar voice from the doorway. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Miss Maria Elena Rodriguez." She turned around and gasped in surprise. Standing in the doorway, looking exactly as kind and distinguished as she remembered, was Lord Edmund Blackwood. "Lord Blackwood," she exclaimed, her face lighting up with joy and amazement. "I can't believe you're here." The children looked up with curiosity as their teacher rushed to greet the well-dressed gentleman. Hope, who had heard stories about Lord Blackwood all her life but had never met him, stared with wide eyes at the man who had given her and her mother their freedom. "I hope you don't mind my unexpected visit," Lord Blackwood said with a warm smile. I'm in Philadelphia on business, and I had to see how you and Hope were doing. From what I can see, you've done remarkable things with your freedom. Maria Elena felt tears of gratitude filling her eyes. Please come in and meet my students. Children, this is a very special visitor. This is the gentleman I've told you about, the one who helped Hope and me become free. The children gathered around Lord Blackwood with shy curiosity. He knelt down to their level and spoke to each one, asking about their studies and listening to their stories with genuine interest. Maria Elena watched in amazement as he treated these children with the same respect and kindness he had shown her 10 years ago. After the school day ended and the children had gone home, Maria Elena, Hope, and Lord Blackwood sat together in the quiet classroom. Maria Elena served tea and shared the story of everything that had happened since their arrival in Philadelphia. Those first months were so hard, she admitted. I was afraid all the time. Afraid I wouldn't be able to learn fast enough, afraid I wouldn't be able to support Hope, afraid that somehow we'd lose our freedom. She told him about the kind people who had helped her get started. There was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly Quaker woman who had taught her to read using the Bible. There was Mr. Williams, a free black businessman who had given her work cleaning his office and had helped her learn about managing money. There was the pastor who had let her start teaching children in his church. But the hardest part, Maria Elena continued, was learning to believe that I deserved good things. After growing up as someone's property, it was difficult to believe that I had the right to dream big dreams and work toward them. Lord Blackwood nodded thoughtfully. I can only imagine how difficult that transition must have been. But look at what you've accomplished. This school is helping to change lives. Hope, who had been listening quietly, spoke up for the first time. Mama has taught me that education is the most powerful form of freedom. She says that when you can read and write and think for yourself, no one can ever truly control you again. Lord Blackwood smiled proudly. Your mother is a very wise woman, Hope, and you've grown into a remarkable young lady. As the evening grew darker, Maria Elena showed Lord Blackwood around the school, explaining her teaching methods and sharing some of the children's work. She pulled out a wooden box filled with letters from former students who had moved away or grown up. This is my treasure, she said, opening the box carefully. Letters from children who learned to read here and went on to do amazing things. She showed him a letter from Timothy, who was now working as an apprentice to a blacksmith and was saving money to bring his grandparents north from slavery. There was a letter from Anna, who had become the first person in her family to attend high school. There was a letter from Samuel, who was planning to become a teacher himself. Each of these letters represents a life that's been changed, Maria Elena explained. Each of these children will raise families who can read and write. They'll pass on education to their children and grandchildren. The kindness you showed me that day in Charleston is still spreading outward, touching more lives every year. Lord Blackwood was quiet for a long moment, clearly moved by what he was seeing. Maria Elena, I have to tell you something. When I bought you and Hope that day, I hoped I was helping two people escape from a terrible situation. I never imagined that my small act would grow into something like this. But that's the beautiful thing about kindness, Maria Elena replied. You never know how far it will spread. You saved Hope and me, but we've been able to help dozens of other families, and those families will help others. Your kindness is like a stone thrown into still water, creating ripples that go on and on. She went to her desk and pulled out another box, this one filled with careful records. I want to show you something else. Do you remember the money you gave me when we left Charleston? Lord Blackwood nodded. I used some of it to get established here, but I've been very careful with the rest. I've saved and invested, and I've used part of it to help other families who arrive here with nothing. She opened the ledger book and showed him columns of numbers. So far, I've been able to help 12 families get started in Philadelphia. I've helped them find housing, get jobs, and enroll their children in school. And that's not all, Hope added excitedly. Tell him about the Underground Railroad station, Mama. Maria Elena looked a bit embarrassed. Well, we've turned our house into a stop on the Underground Railroad. We've helped 23 people continue their journey to safety in Canada. We provide them with food, rest, and medical care if they need it. Lord Blackwood stared at her in amazement. You've become part of the Underground Railroad yourself? But that's dangerous work, Maria Elena. If you're caught helping fugitive slaves, you could lose everything you've built here. I know the risks, Maria Elena replied seriously. But how could I do anything else? When I see people arriving here desperate and afraid, just like Hope and I were, I remember how it felt to have someone reach out and help us. I remember how your kindness changed everything for us." She walked to the window and looked out at the street where children from her school were playing. "Besides, this is about more than just helping individuals escape slavery. Every person we help to freedom is a victory against the whole evil system. Every child I teach to read is a step toward a world where all people are truly free." As the evening came to an end, Lord Blackwood had one more surprise for Maria Elena. He reached into his coat and pulled out an official-looking document. "I have something for you," he said, handing her the papers. "It's a deed to this building. I've purchased it and I'm transferring ownership to you. Hope House School will always have a permanent home." Maria Elena stared at the document in shock. "Lord Blackwood, I don't know what to say." "This is too much." "It's not too much," he said firmly. "It's an investment in the future. Every child who learns to read in this building will go out and make the world a little bit better. That's worth more than any amount of money." Hope threw her arms around Lord Blackwood in an impulsive hug. "Thank you for giving us our freedom," she said simply. "Thank you for helping Mama become the amazing person she is."